Singin' in the Rain, 1952, a classic Hollywood musical. And I guess I'm starting to reverse my mind on musicals completely because I loved it. Although, what makes it so successful as a film in my mind is that it's just a fantastic movie first in its own right, and then a musical on top of that. So it doesn't rely on the songs and dance numbers to tell its story, they just enhance it. So the movie takes place in the 1920s, right, as Hollywood begins its transition from silent films to movies with sound. And we examine the impact of that significant change on several people. Don Lockwood and Lynn Lamont, two co-stars of silent cinema. Cosmo Brown, best friend of Don, a musician working on the movie sets. And Kathy Selden, a wannabe stage actress who Don meets by accident. And despite their initial animosity, they begin to fall for each other. So the first and most important thing is that the film almost hasn't aged. It can still very much be enjoyed now as it was 60 something years ago, which is a very rare treat. I think the reason is that it's just made with a lot of heart and it shows. It's almost a straight comedy, poking fun and laughing at Hollywood and the antics of actors, directors, producers, all the other people involved. But while it's laughing at all those things and people, it's not berating them. It's very much still a love letter to Hollywood and the filmmaking of the 1920s. And as such, it's not a surprise to spot the direct inspirations for a lot of later works in this film. Most recent example would of course be La La Land. It's almost unbelievable to see Singing and see how much La La Land steals from it. And it isn't limited to just movies. To Terry Pratchett's Moving Pictures, one of the books from his famous Discworld series, it's almost directly based on this film in terms of the story. But as they say, copying is the highest form of flattery. So going back to the comedy aspect of Singing in the Rain, I want to point out that what is really rare, especially in modern cinema, is that it utilizes all the different types of humor. There's to great effect. There's straight slapstick, physical comedy, there's puns and word jokes, and there's situational comedy as well. And some of those jokes are fantastically smart, with the setup being just a single line of dialogue somewhere and the payoff happening half an hour later. So to fully appreciate those jokes, you have to really pay attention, which I notice is something that that other old movies did as well. Most notable example here would be Casablanca with its lightning fast dialogue. Interesting to me was that I'm not the biggest fan of slapstick, and I personally thought some of those gags were dated, and I didn't like them as much. But I had a chance to see the film in a packed theater, even more interestingly, packed with almost entirely a young crowd, young people. And the people around me were constantly in stitches. They were laughing at those jokes. So based on that reception, I'd say that even they work on some level. I think singing is also a technical marvel. One thing is the song and dance numbers, which are all terrific, shot with long, often wide takes, showcasing the actor's ability. There's no cheating here with fast cuts and weird camera angles. Some of the dance numbers we get to see almost like on the stage, live. The technical side isn't limited to the musical aspect either. There's a surprising amount of stunts, which, due to the times, of course, are all practical and therefore even more impressive. Then you have the visual side of the film, the timeless technicolor look of the 1950s, which really brings out all of the colorful costumes and lights and sets to life. And I know I'm gushing over this film at this point, but honestly, deservedly so. As I was watching it, I contemplated whether or not it would be another one of the few perfect 10 out of 10 movies in my book. However, it came just short. See, I have very strict rules for naming a movie perfect before I consider it to be a perfect film. One, I need to enjoy watching it throughout the entire runtime. Two, it needs to be objectively, technically well done and impressive. It needs to do something interesting with the tools that it's given. And three, there can't be a single element, no matter how small, that I would like to change to somehow improve the film. It has to be perfect for me as it is. And Singing in the Rain checks the first two boxes easily, but fails just slightly on the last one. See, there's a dance number towards the end of the film, sort of modern Broadway sequence, modern for 1950s, which has no direct impact on the plot and lasts for what feels like forever. It's so long. I didn't count the time, but I would bet it's at least 10 minutes. And every time you think it's ended, it's just the transition and the sequence continues. And don't get me wrong, purely technically speaking, it's probably one of the best in the entire film. And I also understand why it's put there, despite not moving the story forward directly. It serves as a sort of context, a glimpse into what movies would become, similarly to how at the beginning of the film we saw what the movies had been prior to the invention of sound. But for me, the length of this sequence was just too much, and it broke the otherwise excellent pacing of the film. If some of it was cut, I'd be content with naming Singing in the Rain a 10 out of 10 movie. Even so, this is just a tiny drop of criticism in a huge barrel of love, because at the end of the day, it's a delightful piece of cinema, a deservedly appreciated classic, and just a load of fun. So if you haven't seen it yet, go fix your mistake.